Day 14 of 14, the final day of the countdown. Now, I realize not everybody's window opens tomorrow, but you can watch these 14 videos up to when your exam date is. So really what I'm doing today is just talking about what you should do on that last day, the last few hours you've got before the exam. And as I hinted at in the last video, I don't think it's worth getting bogged down in tricky areas, nasty areas, and starting to beat your brain with things that it's clearly told you in the past it doesn't like and is not going to like. Instead, keep it light. Try, as I said yesterday, and go through and pick up some analysis maybe from some areas you've not looked at, and then go for low-hanging fruit, things you can pick up fairly easily that are really kind of dry material in a way and pretty easy just to memorize and get into your head. And follow this rule. It is better to know something about everything than everything about something. Attributed often to Blaise Pascal. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, but apparently that's who it was attributed to. I genuinely thought I'd invented it in my CFA classes, but apparently not. I must have got it from somewhere. But it's relevant to the CFA exam because, as you can see here, we know in the exam that we are going to be tested on each of these 10 topics. It's a fact. We don't know the exact weighting. Obviously, there is a range, but we know we will get questions on every one of those topics. So if you, and I'm not saying anybody has done this, but if you have completely written off alts because you didn't get round to it and completely written off derivatives, you are guaranteeing that you're going to an exam where there will be questions that you haven't studied for. On the other hand, if instead there are just a couple of things here and there in a few topics that you haven't looked at, there is every chance that those things don't come up. It'd be pretty lucky if all of them didn't come up. You'd be pretty unlucky if they all come up. But the point is, there is way more material in every topic than questions in the exam. Look at economics, for example, 6 to 9%, an awful lot in there just for those 12, 13 questions. So what I'm saying is I would spend the last few hours trying to do a sweep of the curriculum and just picking up things that I think, all right, I could probably get that into my head now and take it into the exam. And then it's probably one of those things that will just disappear immediately afterwards, which is fine. So what would I do? I'm not saying you've got time for all of these. These are just some ideas. In ethics, my standard advice always at the end of ethics is focus on those applications of the standards. They're great little examples, little scenarios. They're not questions because they give you the answer immediately, but they give you a feel for the type of scenario you might see in an ethics question. There's, I think, over 100 of them, so you probably haven't got time to do them all, but pick the standards you don't like, the mosaic theory, objectivity, things like that. In quant, go and hit supervised versus unsupervised machine learning. Just know the difference between the two and tie it back to regression. The problem with machine learning is it's really high level. It's just, really, I'm just going to say it again, high level. Just overview is the word I was searching for. Overview definitions, not a lot of detail, so it doesn't get too interesting. So try and tie it to something. Tie it back to regression. We've seen regression. We know in regression that we use X to predict Y. What do we tell our software when we're doing a regression? Well, we tell it what Y was for every X. We say for every X, this was Y. I'm telling you X, and I'm telling you the target Y. Okay, well, is that supervised or is it unsupervised? It just gives you something to latch onto rather than just reading definitions. Economics. One people hate is indicators. In economics, you've got leading, you've got coincident, and you've got lagging. Obviously, leading are going to forecast. Coincident, confirming what's happening. Lagging has happened. So yes, it's a big list, but go and take a look at anything in there that you think, oh, I can actually latch onto this. Because if something is leading, it has to have an element of forecast about it, no? It has to be some way based on the future. So if I start to look at the S&P 500, what's its value? The value of the S&P 500 is the value of each stock. How do I get the value of each stock? Go to your equity section. Well, I get the PV of future cash flows. Okay, well, if I'm looking at an indicator that is based on the PV of future cash flows. I'd suggest maybe it's leading. If you just say to me, what is an index now? What is the index now? Just tell me a list of facts, something that's happened today. You're just telling me where we are. That's got to be coincident. If you're telling me something that's happened, something that's changed over a period, well, if it's changed over the period, you're telling me what happened. That has to be lagging. It's confirmatory on what's happened. So if you just think of that idea and look at the indicators, okay, now I'm starting to see things, yeah. Financial statement analysis, that whole LM on financial reporting quality. Read it with a mind on what you've already studied, because you already know a lot about financial reporting. Yes, there's a little bit in there about bias and audit reports, but it repeats a lot of what you already know. So that's a nice little one to look at because it will link back to things you've already seen. Governance and corporate issuers. Pretty dry. Just as you're going through, Google, go into, ChatGPT, whatever other AI models are available. Just go and have a look at interesting stories. Just look for corporate governance failures. Try and get some big ones and just get them to stick in your head. That's the way you can make it stick. Look at behavioral finance and equity because it's a double bubble. It comes up in equity, it comes up in portfolio management. Not exactly the same biases, but you do get 2 for 1 in quite a lot of these. Again, just go online and look for examples of it and how it's happened and how it influences. Just tie it to a nice little story. Low stress, this stuff. It might not come up and you're just trying to force in an extra couple of points. In fixed income, credit risk. Why credit risk? I'm going for this double idea again. The beauty is credit risk has financial ratios in there. So you're going to recognize some of those ratios. We're going to start talking about cash flows and EBIT and debt. You've already calculated a heap of ratios in financial statement analysis. And when you're looking at quality, well, here we go again. It's always nice when your brain can kind of link them back together. Derivatives, obviously, there's a lot of interpretation of PVs and FVs, but there is a little reading on there in market features. Have a look at that one. Same with alts. There's an awful lot of material on alts, but the basic features of different types of alternative investments and how they fit together, I think is stuff you can just pick up in these last couple of days. Now, that's a lot. I'm not saying you'll get through all of that. Certainly, if you've only got a day, you won't. Just pick 1, pick 2, pick 3. Things like this where you're just, all right, is that going to give me a way to try and remember these indicators a bit better? Is this going to make this definition stick? Just try it. If it doesn't, well, it's the last day. You're just trying to get yourself calm and ready for the exam. The key for the exam is obviously to be calm. Talking behavioral bias, you have spent a good 6, 7, 8 months trying to overcome your cognitive bias, let's say, trying to make sure that you do the calculations correctly. You know how you should deal with information. What you don't want to do on the day is fall victim to emotional bias and start to panic or rush or do all those things that you shouldn't do in an exam. I'm not going to patronize you by telling you to read the question properly and eat a full meal and get good sleep and so on. You know all that. But make sure you turn up with plenty of time. And today, before you go to the exam, walk through a positive outcome. And that means walking through how you're going to get there, exactly what you're going to have with you that you need. Picture yourself handing over what you need to get into the exam room. Picture yourself sitting there and then picture yourself going through, kind of have an out-of-body experience. Watch yourself going through the entire session in the morning, the first session and the entire second session, just going through what you're doing, how it's going, where you need to be. Picture it going well. Going well means you're on time, you're following the clock, you're answering every question. And then on the day, you've already walked it through in your head. You can see what should happen. That's in a calm, unpanicky situation before you're in the exam hall. You're saying, yeah, obviously I can see that's how it should happen. So on the day you see a question, you can't do it, and you start to panic, you go back to that positive walkthrough. Yeah, I expected this. Pre-exam, everyone says, yeah, I'm not getting 100%. I know that. I know I'm not getting 100. There'll be questions I can't do. But then in the exam, your mind panics and says, why can't I do this? I must be able to do this. I need to be able to do this. No, go back to the walkthrough. We said, and when I say we, I mean you and your brain, we said there will be questions we can't do. All right, here they are. How do we deal with them when we were thinking about the walkthrough for a successful outcome? We saw that, we moved on. We guess it, we move on. Sorry, we put down our best estimate and we move on. That is the way forward. The worst thing that can happen on the day is you blow your time. That is a killer. If you start missing out questions, just do the math. I don't want to put any math down here because I don't want to start putting into people's heads any suggestion that I know what the pass rate or rather pass mark is. I don't. But, in your head, decide what you think you need to pass out of the 180 questions you answer. Then take that many questions as a percentage of 160. If you miss out 10 in the morning, the afternoon, and you suddenly start to see the percentage you need to get right starts to rocket. You can't miss questions out. No negative marking here. Multiple choice. You answer everything. My advice, I would go from question 1 through to the last question. I just would. Otherwise, you're flicking backwards and forwards too much, and you're just wasting time flicking backwards and forwards. The only ones I miss out are long questions. I'd rather have those at the end. And then if I do blow my time, I've just got a couple of long questions to do rather than 15 that I don't know. And guess what? If you didn't know them before, you don't know them now. So I know it sounds a little bit soft skillsy, a little bit kind of psychology based, but just picture it. Calmly going through the exam. Yep, I'm going to turn to this screen. There's going to be a question I can't do. How am I going to react? I'm going to say, yep, we know we couldn't do the question. Okay, let's put our best estimate. Let's move on. Tell your brain, don't worry about this. We put an estimate down. We'll come back later on. With all this magical spare time you seem to think you're going to have, we'll come back. And obviously, you don't have that spare time, and it turns out you're right to estimate. Anyway, I'm repeating myself. But do that exercise. Have a look at some of these areas. See if these help you. Just pick up a few marks here and there. Who knows? They might get you 1, 2, 3 extra things. And let us know how it goes. And we will see you at markmeldrum.com for level 2. Enjoy.